What I kind of look for when I think about conflict is we'll get to that point when we're no longer interested in trying to listen to what the other person is saying, and then our emotions begin to spike. And so when it comes to conflict, there's a high relational listening and emotional or emotive kind of component to conflict when we all kind of drift into our own individual positions, and we start speaking out of that position, and we start reading each other from that position. So once we feel like there's been a sense of not being heard or not being understood, which is a basic component of every single person to have that emotional need to be heard and understood. Once that's not being done, and we feel as though that we're at an impasse relationally, that's when that conflict is actually, what we know as conflict, is actually going to begin to manifest between the people. So to me, it has a strong relational and emotive component to it. If you really want to be a person who is helping during conflict, you really need to know yourself. You need to know what's motivating you. You need to know what's driving you. You need to be able to understand what your triggers are, and when these emotions, when these triggers come up, how to deal with them. So when we're dealing with conflict, the best thing that you can do is actually know yourself. And so to me, that is a big part of what I have actually been through on a personal level. I know that when my emotions come into play, I'm not thinking about resolving conflict. I'm not thinking about how to live out Romans 12 when it calls about making peace with all men. And as much as it depends on me, because of my own emotions, I will begin to get in the way of that, of finding peace, making agreements, coming to a good understanding, resolving the conflict. So I believe it really centers on knowing yourself. I really focus on helping everyone listen to what's being said. And let's look behind the words for the emotions. And what does that tell us about what's really being communicated? There's so many layers to any form of communication that's going on, especially with people who are having conflict. So we really want them to understand what's below that, what is driving that. So there may be an impasse around a conflict or a disagreement. That impasse is being motivated by a deeper hurt or a deeper sense of anger around it or fear. And so once we begin to understand what's really driving the impasse on an emotional level, then we can begin to work toward how do we address that. But we have to learn how to listen for those things. And so that's why I usually will help couples. How do we get beyond the words to really what's being communicated here? And that's usually a little bit different. I really do think that's a key thing that is becoming more and more difficult. I also believe that the most basic emotional need that every single person has, now we have seven overall, seven basic emotional needs. But the very first one, it all begins with being heard and understood. And yes, listening is how we make a person feel heard and understood. It's actually just part of that as well. We need to be able to reflect back. We need to be able to connect on an emotional level. But every single one of us, even though we have a difficult time listening or even finding people who will listen, it does not change the fact that every single person wants to be heard and understood. And when we're dealing with conflict, feeling heard and understood can resolve it itself. I see couples trying to have conversations over text, or arguments over text. I'm working with an organization, and they're trying to do everything over email. They don't want to meet face to face. There's so much missed when just in written form or in text form, especially. Yes, we do not feel heard and understood if it's just through social media or texting or even email. We need to be able to connect emotionally. This is not my work. This is actually the work of Virginia Sistar back in the 60s and 70s. She developed the 7 yearnings. It was Mark and I think it's Debbie Lasser who's taken these and put them in within a Christian context. So these things have been around for a while. These are not just my things. These things have been around for a while, but there's 7 basic human emotional needs. The first one is to be heard and understood. Now, when we don't have any of these needs met, we will adapt very unhealthy, maladaptive ways of trying to get these needs met by others. But the first need is to be heard and understood. The second one is to be accepted. The third one is to be affirmed. The fourth one is to feel safe. The fifth one is to be touched and loved. The sixth one is to be chosen. And the seventh one is to be involved. Now, those are your 7 basic emotional needs. And again, when a person doesn't get these needs met just through their natural interaction in a healthy way, they will try to get this met in an unhealthy way. And we see it best in children, but we do it as adults. Because these needs are universal, they're cross-cultural, and you never grow out of them. So just like I have to have a drink of water every day, I need these emotional needs met in some way every single day. And oftentimes when it comes to conflict, what I'm seeing it through the lens of these emotional needs, there's usually some interaction with these emotional needs that's not being met. It's not being considered. But if we can at least acknowledge it, then we can actually kind of move the conversation. So in mediation, sometimes I'm involved in mediation. The only thing that they really want to be heard is each party, that's really the only thing they want, is to be heard by the other one. So I remember having to look at the guy and basically say, now I am here to help you. Now I'm going to help you regardless of whether or not you want that help. I am going to be helping you today. And I'll be working seemingly against you, but I'm going to be working with you because I believe that there's something going on that you actually are looking for today. And you may not be able to put a finger on it, but I bet you by the end of this time together, we're going to get there and you're going to become very much aware of it. And you're going to walk out here somewhat more satisfied. And again, it's around these basic emotional needs that every single one of us has. So I like looking at conflict through these emotional needs. I think that's just something that is a lot more deficient nowadays and a lot more hungered for. I think people are looking for it. And I think that we are trying our best as a society to kind of reinvent the basic need of just been connecting together. And I happen to believe that one of the things that we are going to be appreciating a lot more is just sitting around the table laughing and having a good time. Just social gatherings, social connecting. We're approaching the holidays, and every single one of us is trying to figure out, okay, the biggest time of the year, how in the world are we going to connect with people? And so I believe that we're going to be looking for new ways to do that. But that basic social need of connecting, belonging, yeah, we need that. And if you think about the 7 needs I laid out for you, that interaction, that social interaction is interwoven in each one of them. Basic premise of it all is you cannot meet your own emotional need. You have to have others in order to do that. It's about being chosen. Who is going to choose you? who in the community can you actually feel belonging to, I guess. So the need to be involved is about being a part of, belonging to. We have that. We have to have that. And I feel oftentimes that conflict is about, again, how on a social level, a personal level, relational level, these needs are not just being met. Yeah, I think that we're definitely in a place of feeling that basic need to belong to a group of people, to a tribe, to a family, to a community, to a church. I mean, we are a people, a forgiven people as Christians who are called out, priesthood of believers are called out to live differently. The reality is that this is something that we're going to figure out how to do. And but I think it has prompted every single one of us to long for that even more. What you're saying about Christmas music, yeah, I've already listened to Drummer Boy a couple times already. I found this new group is doing it all acoustically, and I love it. And here it is in the middle of August, and that's not Nick, but I know why I'm doing it because I really want to connect with some memories. I want to connect with when times are normal. And that's just what we do. And so we have meaning around that. We have a sense of who we are. To be accepted, to be affirmed is actually being singled out and says, okay, you are valuable for who you are. And having someone else sitting across the table and saying, I like you. I want to spend time with you. This is funny. You tell the funniest jokes or the story. How do you live with your life? Those type of things is what spur us on. And in my role as a counselor, what I find is what people are wanting more than anything else. Someone just to come alongside them to say, hey, I hear you. I am with you. Not going to go anywhere. I'm right here. People are longing for that, and we're finding new ways to do it. And video is fantastic to get us through it, but it's no substitute for being face to face. Really, what it does is tear down a person's sense of value more than anything else. Sometimes, if we're just not really caring about whatever the issue is, we don't have conflict. The reason why we have conflict is that we care about the situation or the issue or whatever is at the center of that conflict. There's concern there. And oftentimes, when we're trying to work through conflict, we're wanting to find out what that motivating factor is. Where is the caring? Why is this such a big concern? Why does a person care so much to be involved in conflict? Very, very, very few people actually want to be in conflict. So I guess one of the more destructive things is it tears a person down in who they are. But a very positive aspect of conflict is that we're actually seeing a glimpse of what a person cares about. If they're holding a position, they're concerned about something. Now, to me, once we see that and we can begin to speak to that, we can actually begin to move the needle of resolving the conflict. Because again, I know there's impasses about agreements and details always have to be worked out. That's the nature of compromise. I mean, whenever we have conflict, we're going to get to an agreement that perhaps neither one of us are going to get 100% of what we want. But the more important thing is how do we resolve it on an emotional level, especially when we deal with churches, because we're family and we got to figure out how to live together. I believe that's why we have this guideline within Paul's letters about brothers don't sue brothers. We need to figure out another way to resolving that conflict, carrying each other's burdens, dealing with it. I believe on an emotional level is very much a better way, a more biblically defined way, because this is the wisdom of what Paul was saying. We're going to live with this person. We're in the same family, and we're going to be still trying to be together afterwards. And so the positive aspect of conflict is actually we're still brothers and sisters. And we just are going to get to that place where we're able to communicate what we're caring about. And then we're going to learn quite a bit more about the other person. Now, when I know about myself and I feel comfortable in me, then I can be able to reach out to others and kind of learn about what's going on in their lives. But it begins, again, where we started with myself. The more I know about myself and comfortable with that, then I am able to actually see through the arguments, the discord, the name calling, or whatever else is going to take place. Hopefully not that, but we can actually begin to see what the other person cares about. Now we're getting to know them on a deeper level. And to me, that's a key for seeing through conflict. When we look at the life of Joseph, when we look at the life of Nehemiah, when we look at the life of Peter, I'm a very narrative person, and so I really like to draw from the stories themselves. Because again, when I am working with people who are in conflict, I really want them to tell their story. And so from a biblical perspective, I allow that to happen. I also think the basic premise that we're all sinners, and I know I'm a big one. Once we have patience and peace with each other, and peace with ourselves through what the Lord Jesus Christ has given us, then we're able to come through this to a place of being able to read the scriptures from that restorative lens. And so whenever we're approaching conflict, I'm looking for the restoration, the reclaiming, the reclamations of a person's dignity and who they are as a person in Christ or even outside of Christ. That's what I'm looking for. Because not everyone we're going to deal with are going to be Christ followers. But I do believe that we are to live at peace. And so some of those passages are very much narrative. Now, of course, we all go to Matthew 18 and in Romans 12, and there's lots of wisdom about how do we deal with conflict. But I actually pulls from the narratives probably more than anything else. I just love story and storytelling, and I love hearing other people's stories. And so I will actually sometimes within conflict, while I'm working with couples, tell me who this sounds like or feels like from a biblical perspective. You know, who is that biblical narrative that you seem to be pulling from that seems similar to you? So there's all kinds of techniques that we use to kind of use that, as opposed to just look at Romans 12 and tell me what you think you ought to do. I like to use the narratives. And so from the life of John, what do we learn? Or from the life of Paul, what do we see here? I think Paul actually spent a lot of time in the undocumented times that we just don't see, getting to know himself so he can come out and be a man of peace that he was. But I think as we read the story of Joseph, we see a lot of his inner world there. And we can imagine, just because we know how people work, it's universal, what he must have been going through to be rejected, to be sold, to be lifted up, to be under Potiphar, to be under Pharaoh, and to always know who he was. So to me, I go to it so quickly because it goes back to that foundational principle is if he was going to endure all that he endured, he had to know himself well and who he served. He had to have that type of confidence, not arrogance, but just a confidence of who he was. And he never forgot it throughout the entire story. What I see is a deep need for meaning. Who are we? Who am I? Where am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? You mentioned social media a little bit earlier. I know that social media has a great connecting power, but when it's used, kind of like when we think about texting being used, when we begin to try to get meaning or gain meaning through social media, it really begins to show its inability to provide anything that is meaningful or helpful for our lives. It's kind of gone beyond what it was designed to be able to do. It's a great communicator, but I'm afraid that a lot of people are actually trying to get meaning from it. Now, we can use that example and say, okay, there's other people who are trying to get meaning from work or meaning from their financial security, meaning from their relationships. I believe that when we don't have a good centering of our meaning, who we are as a person, where do I want to go in my life? What do I want to do with myself? How am I going to spend my time? What is important to me? What are my values? When those things are in question, we just kind of get pulled every single direction. It feels like the book of James, just being tossed by the wind. And that's what I actually believe is going on, is that we just don't have a deep sense of meaning. We can't read, it seems like, anymore. If it's words beyond what's on our screen, we're not interested. And so taking things in is changing. Our minds are changing about how we even take information in. We're talking about not being able to listen or even taking the time to talk or to be around each other. These things are also attached to our sense of selves, meaning. And so if you're going to ask me, it's going to be about we don't have a sense of meaning. So we're actually just tossed by the wind to and fro. Someone will come into the limelight and steal our attention away. And all of a sudden, we're not grounded anymore into who we are, what we are about, what you are about. And to me, when I'm working with someone, I don't care what the issue may be, whether it's depression or relationship issues or anxiety, I'm going toward, okay, let's talk about who you are as self. Where's your sense of meaning? And that grounds a person. We can endure great things if we know who we are. But if we don't know who we are, we'll be susceptible to be tossed by the wind. And so to me, it has to do with meaning. Who am I? Who am I? A lot of our focus when we talk about conflict is how to deal with the discord of the moment, or how to deal with the emotions around it all. But I also want to point us to think about the transitions after the conflict has been resolved. Again, the desire is restorative. That's what we want. We want to restore. But when we resolve conflict, there is going to be change afterwards. So what we need to be able to prepare for is also a transition of helping the individuals that we're talking to transition after. So it's not just as peacemakers, we're going to try to resolve conflict and now we're going to move on to the next. We're actually trying to figure out how do we help them transition. So that's really the word I like to focus on. Is a part of conflict is helping the people afterwards. Once the agreement is made, the impasse is no more, transition, because there will be a change. There is no resolution of conflict without change.